When you began your journey here at Monumental Baptist Church, did you have any set goals that you wanted to accomplish, and do you feel that you have accomplished them?
Well, it's interesting that you would ask me that question because when the pulpit committee or search committee interviewed me before making their decision, I was asked, did I have a program? And my response then was no. And my response was based on the fact that I needed to know the people. I needed to know something about the church, more about the church than what I knew, in order to fashion what I thought would be a program, rather than imposing a program on a congregation I didn't really know yet. Having said that, I did have some objectives, because I think every pastor has some general objectives when called to a church, and one was I wanted to build a people that would be closer to God. Two, I suppose, would be an emphasis on education. I thought then that Bible study was very important. Three, I thought that the church today has to connect in a better way to the community, because there was a time when churches just expected people to show up because it's there. And now we're in a time where people don't necessarily have the same attraction to the church as they once had. And so I felt it was important to try to connect the church to the community so that it didn't remain behind the walls. But and when I looked at Jesus's ministry, I see one who did very little inside the synagogue. Most of what he did and taught in terms of ministry was outside, among the people, meeting them where they were.
So, Pastor, you've been preaching for 55 years. And in 55 years, a lot has changed. But there's some things that haven't changed, like the Vietnam War. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. My question is to you. When you started preaching out in your early years, you had the Vietnam War. You had poverty in the community. And you had also fathers that were in the homes. Did you ever think about preaching about that in your young career?
I think that when I look back over my preaching years, 55 years of preaching, I would have to say that some of my emphasis has changed over the years, and maybe the word is evolved. And I think it took time in terms of my own growth spiritually, but also when I started out, I was very young. But as I got older, I think the burden of the social gospel was laid on my heart more than in the early years. And I began more to look at the condition of our homes and our families, our neighborhoods, and the world, and even the plight of my people in ways that I had not paid attention to that before. And I wanted to begin fashioning a gospel, the gospel, which is already in the gospel, but I began to interpret the gospel more as I grew older, in light of human conditions, and preach about a gospel that addresses social conditions. But that has evolved. I think that, again, comes with a maturity of age and a spiritual maturity. So my preaching in my younger years, me, I can't go back and I have every sermon just about I've ever preached in a file cabinet. And I cannot go back and re-preach those sermons, because I'm at a different level of spiritual maturity and experience and pastoral experience than I was at that time.
Pastor Mapson, what are some of the most memorable achievements that God has blessed you with to bless you to attain professionally and personally here at Monumental?
Here at Monumental, I would have to go back to pre-Monumental years in terms of professionally. My grandmother never went to school. And when I look back, and she had on my mother's side 7 grands. I'm the oldest, and to be the first with a college education for me was significant, and something that she could rejoice in before she died. And my grandmother grew up in the segregated South. Worked for a family where my grandmother lived. There were dirt roads and no sidewalks, but where she worked with sidewalks and paved streets. And every day she had to go into that home from the back door and take care of someone else's children and clean someone else's house. And it brought joy to me for her to live to see that before she died, that all of her 7 grandchildren had a college education, and many of them are graduate degrees. So I think professionally for me, that was very meaningful, and to even say in terms of the past that I feel the presence of ancestors who never had those opportunities that we have now and that generations have today. I think in terms of Monumental, if I can continue with that, it was eye-opening for me to come from a city of 100,000 people to a city of over 1 million, and all that Philadelphia represented in terms of me coming to a larger city with more churches. I felt where I was that I was in a smaller community, but pastoring the leading church. And I came to Philadelphia, all that changed. And you have great churches all over the city, and I wondered how I could fit and carve out a presence and an influence here at this church, that not to compare with other places, but so that it would be meaningful for Monumental. I found an aging congregation, because churches tend to age with their pastors. And so for me, it's important to try to keep younger people engaged and in leadership, so that we continue to have a youthful presence. But I found a church that had aged significantly, and I felt a challenge to renew the congregation and to bring in people of my age and younger, and I felt that we accomplished it. I have a friend who used to say that when he went to his church, and he's the same age as I am, went to his first church, he was a grandson. Later on, as he lived, he became a son to the congregation, and then later a brother, and then a father, and now a grandfather. And so I think those are the cycles of life, and I think that the next chapter for Monumental will be the same thing, that someone will come in and bring a sense of renewal and youthfulness that can speak to a generation that I think sometimes I have trouble speaking to, and maybe not. But God has always got somebody in the bullpen and waiting to carry the church, because it's not just about the leader or the members particularly. It's about about his work, and his work does not fail.
Yeah.